Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one we're going to be continuing with the item tutorial series, as we have been for the past 6 or 7 videos I think. This one we're going to be moving on to the hotbar now. So this video is going to be mainly focused on hotbar coding, and then next video will be hotbar UI. So just like with inventory, how I spent some time on the inventory coding, then the inventory UI, it's going to be like that. But this won't take as long because we'll be reusing some of the code we've already written and building on top of it, rather than building the framework again. We've already set the foundation, I guess, with the inventory. So the hotbar won't be too hard. But yeah, this video is going to be focused on just setting it up so we can have the hotbar slots and we can drag and drop stuff onto them. But obviously that's going to be the code we're doing. Like, you won't physically, after this video, be able to drag it onto the UI. But a good challenge for you guys at the end would be to build your own hotbar UI and attach the code we write this video onto that UI and hook it all up. That's a challenge if you want to, but if you don't want to, set yourself that challenge, then you'll just have to wait till my next video, which will be in 2 days' time. But yeah, next week I'm going to be away from Monday till Wednesday, so there won't be any streams or videos on the days, at least not me doing them live, so I won't be able to respond to comments and stuff, but I am planning on pre-recording videos to release over those days when I'm not here. So obviously I definitely can't live stream while I'm away, but I can pre-record videos. So if I do put out videos, then obviously you'll have access to them, but I won't be able to respond to any comments until I get back from the camping. But yeah, we can get into this video now, I guess. Let's get into it. But of course, before I get into it, I need to thank my patrons, so a special thanks to Flow State Games, Average Morning, Thomas Huster, Remy Baldwin, and Phil Baum. If anyone else is able to help support the channel monetarily, then the link is in the description below to my Patreon. But apart from that, it would help a lot if people could support on social media by either showing the videos to people that might be interested, or subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, leaving comments. I've got Twitter, I've got Twitch. Anything you can follow on would mean a lot to me, but apart from that, let's get into the coding. Okay, so off camera, the only thing I've done is in our items folder for scripts, I've made a hotbars folder, and I've actually just moved our hotbar item script into here, and then put in the namespace, items.hotbars, and I've just gone through my other files where I referenced this and made sure I was including the correct namespace. So I've not actually changed any functionality, I've just added that in. You can do that if you want to, or obviously if you're following along through my GitHub page, then you'll get the updated code anyway, but I just thought I'd let you know that in case any of you were confused. Okay, so let's create the scripts we're going to need. We're going to need to create a new C# script in the hotbars folder for the actual hotbar itself, like so. We're going to need to create a new script for the hotbar slot, which will be the UI for the hotbar, and then, the UI for the hotbar slots. And then we also need the drag handler, so the hotbar item drag handler. So just like how we made an inventory item drag handler, we need one for the hotbar, because the hotbar and the inventory are going to work, a bit differently. But we have the base class that shares logic anyway. So let's go and do the hotbar first. So for the hotbar, we will be coming back to this at some point when we want to have saving and stuff. But before we worry about saving, we need to actually, implement the systems. So we're going to put in the namespace dino.items.hotbars. And so this hotbar class is actually going to be quite small for now, at least. All it's going to be is a mono behavior, that sits on, the UI. It's going to have an array of hotbar slots. So a private hotbar slot array called hotbar slots. And at least for my game, it's going to be of size 10. But because we're going to make the serialized field private, so serialized field private, you can actually resize the array in the inspector. So that's just the default size, but it will let you do it in the inspector anyway. So we're going to need a function for adding to the hotbar. So public void add. It takes in a hotbar item, because obviously it's the hotbar. You can take in even spells can be added to the hotbar. And it'll just basically say, for each hotbar slot in the hotbar slots, if hotbar slot dot add item, which we haven't made yet, but we'll write it, add item, this hotbar item, we'll call this item to add. So if we successfully add the item to add, then we'll return. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each slot and ask, can you have this item? Can you have this item? Can you have this item? And as soon as we find one where you can, then we'll return. We won't check anymore. There's a loud engine outside. And then pretty much that's it, actually, for now at least. Because the only other stuff we're going to put in here is like saving and loading stuff. The reason why we have this add is because let's say we're in our spell book and you've got a spell and you want to equip it onto your hotbar. Maybe you'll have like a shortcut where you hold like shift click and then that'll add it to your hotbar. That's different to, for example, dragging it onto your hotbar slot. Because if we release an item on a slot, all we care about is can that slot have the item. But if we want to just ask the hotbar as a whole, hey, can you take this item, it's going to say, all right, let me ask my slots, essentially. Now this script's going to be, obviously it's very small at the moment, but eventually we'll build up on it to have saving and loading, so we can like go through all our slots, grab their data, save it to a file, and then when we load, we go through each slot. You could have like a separate save file per slot, and I tried it that way originally, and it didn't work very well. I think it's better to have the whole hotbar as a save file, but we'll worry about saving in its own video. So now we need to make this add item function in the hotbar slot. Okay, so here in the hotbar slot, there's going to be quite a lot of code. We probably won't write all of it this video just because, for example, we haven't got like abilities with cooldowns yet, so we don't have to worry about like the timer cooldown remaining thing. So we're going to skip out a lot of the stuff for now that we will eventually have. We're just going to write what we need. So this is going to inherit from item slot UI, just like how in our inventory slot, we inherit from item slot UI and so on. So we have to do item slot UI, and it's an I drop handler, because we're going to be able to drop stuff onto this slot. But then we need to write the logic for, what happens when you drop something on a hotbar slot that is different to what happens when you drop something in an inventory slot. Because in my game, the inventory the hotbar isn't actually storing items, it's just storing references. So for example, like think of it like World of Warcraft. I'm sure a lot of you play World of Warcraft. When you have items like on your like action bar, essentially, it's not actually storing those items themselves. Like you don't move stuff there. It's not extra inventory space. It's just referencing. So if you have an item on your hotbar and you delete it from your inventory, it deletes it from the hotbar. So they're like linked. So what we want is we want to have reference to the inventory. So CLS field private inventory, like so. All right. So we've got the inventory. We're gonna need the text. So text mesh pro UGUI for the, let me just import that. This is going to be the item quantity text. So if the thing's an item, like an inventory item, it'll have a quantity, so we need to display that on the hotbar. We do kind of want the cooldown UI, but we're not going to do that right now, as I said, so we don't need any other exposed variables. But we need a private hotbar item, which is like our slot item. Whatever we are, whatever this slot is representing, can be null if it's empty. And that's it for now. But because we're inheriting, we need to actually implement a lot of functions. So first of all, we're going to have to implement the, how do we get the slot item? So hotbar item, slot item, like so. So the getter is just return slot item. Okay, so we're just going to return that if we ask for it. And if we try and set the slot item, we'll say slot item equals value. But we also want to, when we set the slot item, we want to update the UI. So we want to say update slot UI. You could put this on a separate line, but I mean, I just like having it like this. We don't actually, oh no, we do have update slot UI as a function. It's a function in the base class that we might override. And next we want to write this function, this add item function, and it's a boolean. So say public bool add item that takes in a hotbar item, which is the item to add. First of all, we'll say, well, like, if the slot item is not null, return false. So if we already have an item in here, then just return false, saying, nope, we're not adding it. Otherwise, slot item is equal to the item to add, and then return true, because we did add it. Okay, so that's adding, and now this other hotbar class is going to be happy, so we can actually close that now. We don't need that anymore. This hotbar item class we don't need anymore anyway. Then below add item, we're going to be able to use the slot. So we're going to eventually want a function public void like use slot, and we're going to take in an index. So when we like press a key, we're going to listen for the input. Like if we press key 1, then we want to go to slot 0 because that's how the indexes work. For now, we're just gonna like leave it empty. Obviously, we're not gonna write it now. I just want to put it there so we remember it. I guess we also just want to put in, why not, if the index is not our slot index, return. Because what we want to do is when we press a key, we want to loop through all our inventory slots and tell them to use themselves, like we're being used, but we want to tell them which slot is actually being used. Equally, we could just go straight to the slot that has been pressed, but the problem with that is if it doesn't exist, then there's a problem, and also because we're using events, it won't work that simply. We'll get into that later when we actually we're not actually going to be doing like an ability system in this series, but what I can do is I can make an ability just be like debugging something, and when we press a slot that has an active item, it debugs something. I don't know. That's its own system, obviously. Abilities, that can be something else. And then we can just say here like use item. Okay, and then now we want to do the override for onDrop. So onDrop. What happens when you drop something on this slot? Well, we want to get the item drag handler from the thing that dropped us. So item drag handler is equal to event data dot pointer drag dot get component item drag handler. And if item drag handler is null, return. So just make sure the thing that dropped us is like an item drag handler. But then if it is, we're going to say, well, we actually need to do some casting here to basically check what it is and then do something different based on what it is. So for example, if it's an inventory slot, then we want to set it. If it's a spell slot, we want to set it. But if it's a like hotbar slot, then we actually want to just swap it. So if we're dropping something from the hotbar on a different hotbar slot, we just swap the places. Whereas if it's from externally, then we want to set it. Now we might refactor this in the future, but for now this is it works just fine like this. Though doing multiple casts isn't that like time efficient, but because we're only going to do it literally whenever we drop an item on the slot, that's not like the most common task you're doing. It's not get called every frame. It's only getting called, when you try moving stuff around the inventory, which shouldn't be during combat, so you're not even going to notice a frame drop, even if there was one, but there won't really be one. It's fine. So we can say item drag handler the item slot UI as an inventory slot. Then we're going to say if the inventory slot is not null. If anyone actually has a better way of handling this, then feel free to let me know, because I'm all open ears. But this is the way I did it, and I couldn't think of a better way at the time. I'm sure if I sat down and thought about it, I could. But what we're basically doing is we're saying, treat the slot as an inventory slot, and then we say, well, is it an inventory slot? And if it is, then we're going to say, well, get the item from that inventory slot, set it, and then return. Then we have to do the same for other types of slots. Now, currently we don't have spells, so that's fine. I'm just going to leave that how it is. But we do have hotbar slots because we just made them. So hotbar slot equals item drag handler dot item slot UI as a hotbar slot. I mean, this works just fine, but the reason why I think it could be better is, let's say we do end up keep adding like more and more types of different slots and stuff that can be dragged around. We don't want to have to keep like expanding this function saying cast it to all the different types and then see this, see that. Maybe it is the best way, and obviously if people agree that this is how they would do it, then, let me know. But I am, wanting probably a better way to do this. For now, it works just fine. We want to say, well, if it's a hotbar slot and we're dropping it on a hotbar slot, then what do we want to do? Well, we're just going to say store the old item. So we've got we've got the old item. Then we're going to set ours to the hotbar slot dot item. So we've cached what we are. We're then gonna, well, not the image. We've cached what we are, and now we're setting ourselves to the thing that was dropped on us. Then we want to set the thing that was dropped on us to what we were. So it's just swapping, essentially. We're setting us to them and them to us. And then return. Okay. And then for the UI, So wait, this is the function here. So we want to say public override update slot UI. Well, what do we want to do when we update the slot UI? Well, we want to say if slot item is null, so if there's nothing in this slot, then we want to enable slot UI false, so we want to disable it, and then return. But what if, I can't spell, can I? But what if this slot does have something in it? Well, we want to set the item icon image dot sprite equal to the slot item dot sprite dot icon. So we're going to set our icon. We're going to enable the slot UI to true. And then we want to set the item quantity UI. I've put it in a separate function just to separate the logic out. And then we also want to update the cooldown UI here, but we don't actually have a cooldown system yet, so that doesn't matter. So the actual setting of the item quantity, private void set, I'm just going to copy and paste it. It's just going to basically check, does the thing we're storing have a quantity? And if it does, then set the UI for it. It's quite a short function. We're just going to say if slot item is inventory item. And now this inventory item is like a local variable, so we can say, well, what if the inventory dot item container dot has item inventory item. So we're saying what are we, and if we have the item. I can't remember why did I have this. Oh, okay. So what can happen is we can let's say, for example, we are an item, we're storing this item, and then the player uses the item, and now we've got a quantity of 0 and we've run out of it. The slot needs to check if the player still has that item we're referencing, because we're just storing an item, not an item slot. So we don't have a clue really how many of ourselves, like how many, if we're a health potion, we don't know how many health potions the inventory actually has. It could be 0, we could have just used them all up. So we need to say, does the player still have us? If it does, then int quantity count is equal to the inventory dot item holder dot get total quantity, which we wrote at, in like the first video, I think. Inventory item. So yeah, we're basically saying go get the total of us, like how many is the total, and then set the text. So text equal to quantity count is greater than 1 question mark. I'll explain the syntax in a minute in case you don't get it. Dot to string or blank. So what this is doing is it's saying if the quantity count is greater than 1, so if we've got 2 or more, then set it to the actual count of the quantity. Otherwise, set it to a blank string. So that's just my way of doing it. If you have 1 of an item, if you've got, let's say health potions stack up to 5, but you've only got 1, you don't usually see it say like that you've got 1. It doesn't say like 1x or x1. It'll just have the item. As soon as you get 2, it'll say 2x to let you know you've got multiple. So this is going to basically hide the count unless you've got more than 1. That's the way I think it should be. If you don't want it like that, then you can change it, but that's what I prefer. And then we're going to set the slot item to null. We're going to basically clear our slot if the player doesn't have that item anymore. And then else down here, so like if it's not even an inventory item, we just want to say item quantity text dot enabled equals false. So we're just going to disable the text element if there's nothing there. And I think that's it for this script. We actually have to override one more thing. So at the bottom we want to override enable slot UI to say we want to do the base, and we want to set the item quantity text dot enabled equals and then the boolean enable. We will add more here for the cooldown, but basically we've done everything here apart from the cooldown, which is fine because we're skipping over that for now, or we haven't made it. So that's the hotbar slot done, and now there's one more script to work on for this video, which is the drag handler. So the drag handler, I'm going to put in the namespace dapperdino.items.hotbar. Put the class in here. And what we want to do for the drag handler is we want to say what happens while we're dragging a hotbar slot item. It's pretty simple. We just want to essentially say override on. No, we have to say public. Oh wait, it's not going to be able to override unless we say we're inheriting from item drag handler. So now we can say override pointer up. So when we do pointer up, we're going to say, well, if the event data dot button is the left mouse button. So if we release the left mouse button on a hotbar slot, while we're dragging a hotbar slot, we want to say if we're not overriding anything. So if the count is 0, then we want to cast item slot UI. I'll explain this in a second, don't worry. As a hotbar slot dot slot item equals null. The reason we're doing this is because if we release an item from our inventory, if we drag it out and release, we want to destroy it. But if we drag it off the hotbar, we just want to clear the reference. We just want to make the hotbar slot not be referencing anything. So when we release, if we release over nothing, then we want to clear the slot. That's all that code means. We can get rid of the unused usings. We can save all. And I think that's it for this video. We've written all the code for the hotbar. Let's just check any errors, if there are any errors. Otherwise, we'll be good to go. Yeah. So the next video will be creating the hotbar. I hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, it wasn't too long, but that's because it was quite simple to set this all up. There's not much more code we need to write for the hotbar until we get onto cooldown stuff. So next video, we'll make the hotbar here. We'll make all the slots. We'll make the slot prefab, put all the code on it, and then we'll be able to drag items onto our hotbar. And then you can store stuff there. And if you drag something on there twice, they would both be the same thing, essentially. Like maybe you want to have the same spell on 2 keys. I don't know. Maybe you don't. Probably most people don't. But some people might, so they're allowed to do it if they want to. If you have any suggestions, then feel free to leave them below. The link to my GitHub page is in the description in case you got a bit stuck, so you can go look through the code, download the project, have a look through it, experiment, find bugs maybe in the code. I don't know. Tell me improvements for efficiency and stuff, then I can show everyone else. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you can, like I said before, help me out on social media. It would mean a lot. I'm streaming every 2 days, well, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Apart from next Tuesday, that won't be the case because I'm away. But yeah, I think I've said everything. So I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.